Hi, everybody. Welcome back. I hope you had a great time meeting our sponsors, Ellevate, and other attendees during the expo break. Again, if you weren't with me this morning, I am Megan Oliver, Marketing Associate at Ellevate Network, and I am so excited to welcome you back to our second batch of sessions of the day. Please welcome our moderator, Andrea Klein-Thomas, journalist at CBS News, and our two panelists, Zoreh Rosmat, founder of The Step, and Imran Ahmed, CEO of the Center for Countering Digital Hate, for a conversation about online ethics.
Welcome to this conversation on online ethics. I'm Andrea Klein-Thomas. So glad that you all are joining us for this discussion that no doubt affects every single one of us. Just a few housekeeping notes. We're going to go ahead and have a great conversation with Imran and Zari, and then we're going to be able to take your questions at the end. So if you could please use the chat function. If you've got a question, we're going to try to get to some of those at the end. And Imran and Zari, they're going to have wonderful things to say, things that resonate deeply with you. We want you to share those thoughts online using the hashtag Mobilize Women. And we're just going to go ahead and dive into the conversation now. We've got a lot of topics to cover. Now, the internet these days can seem like the wild, wild west. And the term online ethics can sometimes seem like an oxymoron, but it shouldn't be. So, Zari, let's go ahead and start with you. How should we think about ethics online?
Hi, Andre. Well, I think the online ethics is the same what happens offline as well. I mean, all of we know that we do have some, set of rules that we can behave. Same thing with online thing. The only thing that differs, online we can, we cannot recognize who is writing and those bots and all other those who can harass us at any time, any person, not only journalists but very regular people. So as for me, there is no difference in the way that we should behave well, let's say. But I mean, online it spreads very fast and you cannot actually control it. I mean, if there are no laws on it and no one can, influence that. So it has much more bad impact that like in like, let's say, about harassment. So if it happens like offline, you can do something about it, whereas online we cannot. So I think the only difference is that there's more harm if there are no set of rules in terms of having some ethical rules on behaving online.
Yeah, and Imran, with no guardrails, who is most affected by this unethical behavior?
Well, I mean, Zori puts it really well. There's this considerable difference between social mores, so the norms of behavior, and ethics. Now, we know that online social mores, the norms of behavior, are different to the offline world, and often in really problematic ways. Because what you have online is not an inclusive democratic discourse, but actually quite exclusive and quite authoritarian discourse in which abuse is used to create new geographies of safety and power, is used as a tool of oppression, of exclusion. At a very simple level, if you know that every time you go online, you have to accept abuse as, say, a woman or a black person, a person of color, an LGBT person, what you create are taxes on involvement. And the CCDH was set up we were set to look at really acute stuff. I mean, terrorism, extremism, but it's not just, sort of malignancies in society themselves that we should be interested in, but also the causes of them. And a lot of them are caused by the breakdown in human rights being expressed and being acted out in online spaces.
So you touch on a lot of things, Imran, there. One, I had never heard that taxes on involvement, just being put that way. That's so true. But even just expanding on that, you're kind of talking about how like the squeaky wheel, is the one that gets the most attention. With these algorithms in place, it just magnifies that, right? And it creates a bubble effect. How do you manage then that bubble effect if it rewards that aggressive viral behavior?
Well, I mean, you have to change the way that the business, and this is something that people like Roger McNamee, Tristan Harris, Francis Haugen talk about, that this is a fundamental business model problem. That if your business model for social media companies, they're actually really simple, basic companies. They're advertising platforms. That's it. 98% of Facebook's revenue doesn't come from cloud services or anything else. It comes from advertising, really simply. And, you aren't the user, by the way, like you, me, Zori. We are not the users of social media platforms. The advertisers are the users. We're the product. Our data is being sold. Access to our minds is being sold. Insights into us that even we don't realize, psychographic insights based on how we interact with content, how long our eyes linger on particular videos. All of that is being sold. I think that the problem is that we have business models that require that understand their core logic is keep us on platform for as long as possible. And crucially, thanks to US law, and the US law is very specific and very unusual in this, it has given a liability shield. So it is said that the Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act 1996 says that social media companies cannot be held legally liable for content produced by a third party. So what you have are businesses that accrue lots of content from lots of different people, monetize it, and then don't take any responsibility for the harm that's created on their platform either.
Zori, I want you to weigh in about your business called The Step. You're creating a new kind of publication without clickbait or misinformation. We know that there's a need, but do you think consumers want to step out of their echo chambers? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry. Well, so the question is is it on purpose? So we're going that way, right? I mean, we're escaping, for example, some. So Andre, I didn't get your question. So
yeah, so tell us about you creating this step, and people are looking online to hear what they think. They want that reflected, what they think, what their ideas are reflected back to them, and that's part of what these algorithms do. Is whatever they're looking at, what they're searching for, then they see more of that, right? So it's more of oftentimes what their beliefs are, they're not getting the counter ideas to different topics. And so your platform is really trying to kind of take a neutral stance and really give people the information that they need in a healthier way. So tell us about creating it and what you're hoping the consumer gets from it.
So it's really hard to sustain this our view in a way that we're giving very positive, let's say, news. We're trying to escape any clickbait thing, because if we'll go that way, so for me, as a founder, it will be crucial to I don't want people to wake up and go through that the flood that they have, like on social networks, any news outlets and stuff. So for example, in my country, we have a lot of newsrooms, and usually they go that way. They're giving people what they want. For example, like any negative like news or whatever. So, and when you see that people share it, so the mindset of a person who reads or consumes that information, it's really frustrating, I would say. So our goal is to go in a different way, so that our editorial, let's say, set of rules would dictate at some point, which is not actually, we were criticized for that, because like people would say, why don't you cover politics, and why don't you do this and that? I mean, I would go and I would say there are so many business models. Let's say my project, like, we do earn money from advertising and stuff, but we do still control it, I mean, ourselves manually, because we don't want people to read I would say negative fake news, let's say, if we won't control it, there will be a lot of, that kind of information. For example, under our law, I mean, I'm from Kazakhstan, and then we do have this, control thing in the sense that you cannot just leave a comment, without any consequences. Let's say you are responsible for what you are leaving, writing, and doing. So in that sense, it's not about the freedom of speech. We do have it. I mean, it's not a problem with that. But my agenda is different, and that what makes me different from any other new like media outlet. I mean, but again, as we were criticized because of that, I mean, we have to be, like 360 degrees in the way that we have to give different information and stuff. So we're kind of always struggling, but still we're trying to sustain and, stay true to our rules, let's say, and beliefs, because we do believe that the person has to wake up and read something positive first. Like it's the first step, and then the second, of course, they can go through social networks. There's so much of I don't know, like bad stuff happening. So yeah, this is it so far. It's hard still, but in the long run, let's say if we're looking at as a business model, our advertisers, any big companies, they don't want to go to any media outlet where you can only scroll very sad news. Let's say, they want to have a different agenda. That's it. I mean, I hope I answered your question, but that's the reality. And then within, this COVID times and stuff, our readers, they would leave comments saying, thanks, you guys are there, because it's just uncontrollable what's happening online on social networks, and the step gives different perspective of what can be, and what they step encourages them and motivate them to, to have, this very different positive thinking.
Yeah, no, it's definitely very necessary. I can say that, when we're managing what people are viewing on our websites and stuff like that, a lot of times it is the doom and gloom, and people are like, where is the good news? And it's a hard, it's definitely a hard balance. So I'm glad that you exist, to give people that hope, because it's really necessary, because there's just a lot of, negative things going on. And Ron, I wanted to go to you, where you're taking it even a step deeper by holding organizations accountable for misinformation. Can you tell us what that looks like and what the effect has been?
Yeah, I mean, from the very start, we've been looking to look at the dynamics of how bad actors organize, recruit, fundraise online. And we actually initially, so we've been around for 6 years. I set up CCDH after my colleague in the British Parliament, Jo Cox MP. She was a mother of 2, and she was murdered by a far-right terrorist during the EU referendum. He shot and stabbed her to death. And he'd been radicalized online in part. And what I spent the next 4 years doing was thinking, well, how is it that the primary spaces in which we share information, in which we negotiate our values as a society, we set our norms of behavior, we even negotiate the information that we will decide are facts as a society, has shifted to these online spaces. If there is no accountability exerted by the platforms, then we're in real trouble. So if the platforms don't say, we have rules against hate, we have rules against misinformation, we're going to actually implement those rules in practice. So initially, we spent 3 years talking to the platforms, thinking that the problem was they didn't know how bad it was. Unfortunately, we realized that the policy process is an elaborate gaslighting process. Meanwhile, they were lobbying politicians. $120 million spent by just Amazon and Google in 2020, more than Philip Morris and Exxon, in Washington to lobby politicians and to 501c3s and super PACs and everything else that have been doing all this work. So you're up against a very entrenched opposition that are actually not willing to change, because it is so phenomenally profitable for them not to do so. So, and what we had to develop was a model in which, first of all, we expose the harms through the research that we keep on our website, counterhate.com, but also, crucially, through policy work. And we've been working with legislatures around the world, basically holding them to account on what we call our STAR framework. So we want to have rules whereby platforms have to have safety by design, exactly as Zori has been thinking about from the beginning, thinking about how do I make this a healthy platform in which people's fundamental right to dignity, to life, but also to their right to good information is being observed. And then transparency, which is really important because these are very opaque platforms. We don't really know how ad exchanges work, which is part of Zori and CBS's and everyone else's problems, that actually good news doesn't get paid as well as bad news does, right? And then responsibility for companies and executives. And actually, there is legislation. I've been working on this for 6 years. I can tell you by the end of this year, in the country I come from, the UK, we will have legislation. In the country I now live in with my wife, is the US, I think we're getting there. I think we're making the case. And thanks to events like this, we're building the support that we need for legislation here as well.
And, you know, where does, though, the talk, when we talk about this, especially in the US, free speech, where does that, you know, idea, how does that fit into this conversation?
Well, it's funny this, because look, let's take the other Texas had a law of, or was it Florida that passed a law that said, sorry, I'm terribly jet lagged, so I've just come back from my honeymoon. So like, I can't remember which state I'm in at the moment. So there's a state that passed a law which said essentially you can't censor based on conservative or political opinion. There is an argument had that these platforms have a political persuasion. What the platforms argued was, users don't have a First Amendment right on our private platform. We have a First Amendment right to decide who we associate with, who we publish, and what is said on our website. And that's the absolute truth. And in fact, when you sign up to use that website, you sign up to terms and conditions. Now, those are your responsibilities as a user, but there is a necessary corollary to every responsibility, and that's a right. That if the three of us have a responsibility not to act in a hateful way, not to slur people for their ethnicity or their gender or their sexuality, then at the same time we have a right to expect others to do that to us. And it's the platform's failure to enforce basic rules, to create consequences for breaching their rules, that has allowed the norms to emerge, whereby they now say acting like an absolute scumbag is normal, and in fact is people's fundamental right to each other. You can't have an opinion on that. Of course you can have an opinion, and of course you can say, I don't want this person, attending my scout club, coming to my pub, sitting in my restaurant shouting abuse, or coming on my platform and using it as a megaphone to tell the world hatred and misinformation.
You know, Zari, you were talking about on your platform the step that users can't just leave any type of comments, that there are consequences. Elaborate that more. Or if somebody does try to come and does try to put something hateful in the comments, how do you deal with that?
Well, we do have, some features like so that they can comment through Facebook, for example. So we can see if the person is eligible to do so. I mean, it's the real person, right? It's not a bot, for example. So that's the widget that we have. This is the only way we can actually somehow control. We're not saying that they cannot leave comments, but they have this, this authorization coming. And probably like on our website, there is no opportunity to create a fake account, for example. So this is how we try to, let's say, control. But we cannot control, as Imran said, social networks, for example. Like there are so many fakes there. And that's the problem, actually, because so many journalists were bullied, abused, or harassed, or like after that. So that's the big issue, actually. For, as I said, if there are no rules on Instagram, Facebook, let's say, that actually can help us to figure out as a publishers, so it will be hard to actually to fight back. I mean, for example, there was I mean, there are cases all over the world, but France controls it a lot. And then, for example, recently, like in Indian elections, for example, they also harass journalists. And for example, the only thing that they could make actually is just to set some rules of fighting back. And it's a pity, right? I mean, why would, like, journalists fight back of that? I mean, not the platforms or any other, let's say, laws, for example, would fight back. So the only thing that we can do as a small group is create, let's say, set of rules, how to react bots, how to not react them, how to block them, and stuff. So it's a very actually important topic, and it's hard to just, the only thing, as Imran said, we can create our set of rules and follow them. That's it. I mean, for now, if not journalists, people, they are not actually protected from any abuse online.
I could say from experience, the most emboldened people are the ones who don't have pictures on their profiles, have the egg or whatever. They're the most emboldened, have the nastiest things to say. And we'll just segue.
And especially it happens, especially it happens when it comes to some big issue, for example, lobbying, protests and stuff. So all of them, they're there, like the bots and, all the abusers. Once you're trying to raise any important topic, they would go there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if I can make the point here that if we think that one of the main ways in which we establish our personal brands, now this is a network of professional women who, are building that, people like all the rest of us who are building our careers, building our personal brands, building our CVs. We're trying to communicate with people. We're trying to transact business. We're trying to create business opportunities. We're trying to create new relationships. I use it to reach out to people. I use it to reach out to the Nobel Peace Prize winner, Maria Ressa, the journalist from the Philippines. And she attended our conference in Washington a couple of weeks ago because I used social media to reach out to her initially. These are really important platforms. If you tell women, if you tell people of color, if you tell people because of who it is that they love, that every time they use that platform, they're going to receive abuse. If I was told that every time I left my house in Washington, I would never leave home. If every time I left, someone shouted, you blah, 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 I'd never leave my home. I don't like being called bad names. And so on social media platforms, the current situation is that the lack of responsibility taken by companies for what happens on their platform, for identifiable harms, for easy to deal with harms, means that we're going to have to do something to make sure that they bear some of the cost of the negative externalities, the harms that their platforms produce. And that sounds in one respect very economic, but actually its real word is normal regulation. That if you create pollution, you should pay for it cleaning it up, right? And our information ecosystem is polluted, and it's polluted in a way that particularly kills people of color, women, gay people. And in Myanmar, it led to a genocide of Muslims.
And so this is called Mobilize Women. What ways, there's a question of, is there something that we can do to hold social media companies accountable, especially if lawmakers are struggling with how that should look?
Well, I mean, yes, first of all, I would argue our behavior online
matters.
Right. I am respectful and polite online.
Yeah.
Just as I try to be in my real. I'm British, so I swear a lot. But but I try to behave in the same way offline and online as I do offline. Beyond that, there's things like don't feed the trolls, which it's not about just not feeding the trolls. It's about the mathematics of platforms in which engagement equals amplification. And so if you look at our website, counterhate.com, we've got Don't Feed the Trolls. There's a 20-page evidenced explanation of how you can behave in the most effective way possible to protect your mental health, but also reduce the prevalence of hatred in our world as well. And then there are organizations that are working to first of all, you should be going to the step and reading the articles there, sharing it with other people, making sure they're getting eyeballs on their content, because that's good content. The best gift you can give in an information war is good information, is the truth, is science, is facts, is people who are committed to high levels of ethics, including the mainstream media providers like CBS. But then there's also organizations like mine, which are trying to clean up some of the pollution. And, we're a charity, we're a 501c3, you know how you can help us.
Yeah. And sorry, I wanted to talk about its impact on children, because, we are, like, for me, I'm not a digital native. Like, I remember when there wasn't the internet, right? Like, I know the difference, right? And I still have a context of, like, this is not fully real, but for children, this is all they know. And when we're talking about harassment, it's devastating. It's devastating children, especially since they've had a lot more screen time with the pandemic. How do we have, help children have better relationships with online platforms?
So I've read a case when, I'm a mom myself, so I have a teenage girl, so she's online a lot. And then I think the only thing we can do as, let's say, parents or any other person who actually cares about it, we just have to explain what can happen if this and that, will occur, or Charles or whoever, or your peers would, go that way and troll you and, abuse you. So I think it's like preventing this thing, preventive actions, because a lot of kids, they don't have a good relationship with even parents, and you cannot discuss with them, those very vital topics. But the only thing, as I said, we should explain in schools, universities, whatever it can happen. It's an ethical thing. It's a very, I would say, psychological stuff, because you cannot actually escape social networks at all. It's a part of life. Online world is our part of life, but you have to have this hygiene, right? So you have to know how to act there, what to share, what to show. And of course, it's hard, to explain to a kid, but you have to do so. Media companies should do that. And actually, like, for example, TikTok is like, we are there as well as a step, and we can see how TikTok, like when we share same thing on TikTok or Instagram, we have different effects, which means that the audience that consumes it on TikTok is quite different from what we do on, for example, like our platform. So in that sense, we do feel responsible for that, and we try to educate them. So education is the only way we can actually stop it. Otherwise, what we can do, they love it. They love entertainment. They love it a lot, and which is okay. But again, preventing it, explaining it, and educating them. Otherwise, we will just fail. So many bad stuff happened with, especially with kids. They're afraid to share. If someone, threatens them, harasses them, and then we have the suicides coming up, and there are so many cases actually. I think online harassment is much more dangerous than offline. They bully each other at schools, which is, let's say, it's not okay, but it's still there. But when they're bullied online, it's much more, because, like, as a parent, I'm not controlling her, I'm not checking her account, right? I don't have that access because I trust her. But again, if you will miss this thing, I don't know. It's a very touching, I'd say, topic.
Yeah, it's very difficult because it follows them home. It's one thing when kids were bullied in school, at least they would have a reprieve at home, right? But now it just follows them everywhere they go. It's in their bedroom. It's, just on their phones with them all the time. And Ron, is anyone doing it well? Is any platform doing it well?
No, of the major platforms, no. The most successful platforms are most ruthless. Here's the problem. When you have no rules to the game, when you have no regulation, when your regulation, as it is in the US, is literally, the policy is to give complete immunity to platforms for any harms they produce. Can you imagine any other industry having that protection? A car manufacturer that isn't held liable if they produce cars that explode every time you hit them. they would produce exploding cars. We know that because Ford did that with the Pinto back in the 70s, when there was no liability for what they did. Look, here's the thing that's really important, is that we've got this new technology. It's potentially amazing. But the way that we make it amazing is by stopping the race to the bottom. We stop the race to the bottom by saying that actually there should be basic ethics in place and accountability in place for these companies, transparency in place for these companies. We need legislation. There are people seeking to do that. But, speak to your congressman, speak to your senator, make sure people know that you take tech accountability and reform seriously. And if we say that actually the information ecosystem that my generation, I'm 43, has produced is actually catastrophic, and to generations coming up, working, but like with the physical environment, we may have done damage to the information ecosystem, but we're there now to help you to put that back together, to change the rules of the game, to try and improve things. I think we can make it better. And Zori's got kids. My wife and I, we are, we're very, very keen to have children too. And I can tell you that this is a discussion that we have every day. And the two bits of advice I'd give any parent are, first of all, remind not only your kids but yourself that the social media platforms are for entertainment purposes only. You don't actually know who's put that information there or what their motivation is. So unless it's coming from a known organization that holds itself to high standards, be cautious about what you see there. The second thing is, and this is something I tell my 4 sisters all the time, never ever be dependent on anyone else. Don't think your self-worth comes from social media or the likes that you get for a post. Use it as what it is, a brilliant way to connect to billions of people. But don't base your self-worth on those platforms, because they are not healthy, or they're not healthy places to base a reflection of your self-opinion on.
That's
and one more thing to add, maybe to close up, blocking trolls, it's a very good strategy, to be honest, and then have to spend time on them.
Completely agree. Yeah.
That's a wonderful place to end. What an interesting conversation. Imran Ahmed, the Center for Countering Digital Hate. Follow them. Zari Razmat, the CEO at The Step. Follow her as well. Both of you, thank you so much for your time and for this really informative discussion.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye, guys.
Bye.